jump into it. Yeah, Dylan,
Let's do it.
let's embarrass Ben with some accolades.
Let's do it. Hey, I'm the accolade guy. I always kind of, research the guests, give, the listeners kind of a little bit of a backstory, read the highlights, and then we'll have you kind of fill in the gaps. And, like any resourceful millennial, I looked you up. You have a Wikipedia page, which we always feel, pretty flattered when we have a guest as a Wikipedia page. It's pretty cool. I feel like, we're with a celebrity.
Mine says 3-party in college and got lucky and dropped out and got a real estate license. That's cool.
And I was resourceful, so I was reading through it. It's a good 3 pages long, and so I threw it into ChatGPT. Said summarize this in bullet points. So if anything's wrong here, you have to. If anything's wrong here, you have to blame ChatGPT, okay, or Wikipedia. So for those of you who don't know Ben, entrepreneur, professional speaker, author, and real estate agent. I actually love your LinkedIn title. I think it says the only one that's not a CEO, thought leaders. You have a good LinkedIn title. But you founded, you founded Ben Kinney Companies, BKCO, which includes various sales divisions, brokerages, training companies, and tech firms. Notable companies under BKCO: NVNTD, Blue Roof 360, Activerain, Automabots, Brivity, and Blossor. You co-founded the real estate technology platform Place in 2019, which operates across U.S., Canada, and the UK. This one was crazy. Goldman Sachs and 3L invested $100 million into Place in 2021, so just 2 years ago, at a valuation of over $1 billion. You've been listed on the Wall Street Journal and Real Trends Top 1,000 Agents from 2011 to 2022. You were the 2014 Innovator of the Year by Inman News. You entered the real estate industry in 2004 and were the top-ranked agent in Washington State in transactional volume from 2012 to 2021. You've sold over 5,000 homes. Pretty decent. You need to get those numbers up. And your early life included growing up in a small cabin without indoor plumbing or power in Oso, Washington, which, little tangent on this. I remember early in my real estate career, actually, I heard you speak at the Silver Reef Casino. And you talked a lot about your early life and just some pretty incredible struggles that you went through. And so we'll definitely dive into that that was pretty moving early on in my career. And then while completing your 4-year degree at Western, which is probably, I'm assuming, what brought you to Bellingham, you worked as a cable television installer for Comcast, I believe.
True.
And has the record, I think, was it for the biggest Comcast deal at the time?
Oh, different company, but similar story.
Yeah.
Later transitioned into the door-to-door sales of cable television, telephone, and internet services before starting his career in real estate in 2004. So obviously, those are the highlights. Those are the bullet points from ChatGPT, picked from Wikipedia. But, fill in the gaps there. Also, what I'm really fascinated about, like I alluded to, is, your early life. Growing up in Oso without modern utilities, it sounds like. Just bring us from that point to, modern day where we're at today.
I mean, if there's anybody still listening after that rambling, I hate bios, accolades, even titles in a company, because anything that makes you feel or seem like you're not at par with everybody else upsets me, right? So if you go into my office and you see the sign outside my door, it just says nice guy. And in my company, we all have the same title, janitor and CEO. And I say that all the time to our people, and I mean it with all due respect, because my mom was a janitor and I know how hard she worked, and she was willing to do any job in that high school is where she worked. And at night she worked as a waitress, and we're all the CEO. And if we live that way, then we can have a pretty cool company. If everybody in your world looks up and says, I'm willing to do the worst job and the best job. Yeah. So you want to go far back in time?
Yeah, let's hear it. Start us off. Kick us off.
Washingtonian, born and raised. Parents separated really young, and kind of bizarre even in today's time. My dad took me, and my mom took my sister. I think because neither one of them wanted to pay child support, and my dad felt like he could raise a son, and my mom, felt like she could raise my sister. So my dad took me up into the woods in Oso, Washington, like you said, and we lived in a cabin. It was about 280 square feet. We had an outhouse and no indoor plumbing, and we cooked on a wood stove. And that got me till about high school. And in high school, I moved in with my mom because she had a shower. It was a single wide trailer in Granite Falls, but it was at least had a shower, and I discovered girls, and that time girls appreciated showers. Showers
number one
yeah.
step.
It wasn't just the Axe body spray shower. That's what we did in middle school.
They didn't have Axe body spray back then.
Right.
So
That was our middle
What'd you
school.
do then? Without Axe, what'd you do?
you just took a shower, rub leaves on yourself or something. And in Granite Falls, I went to high school. My mom was pretty severely an alcoholic and pretty addicted to drugs and pain pills and just all kinds of stuff. Half of which is legal now in Washington State. But she was a good mom. She worked really hard, and she had 2 jobs most of the time. Like I said, janitor and a waitress, and she taught me work ethic. My dad was not as driven career-wise, but he taught me to say please, thank you, and look people in the eye and hold the door for people when they walk in, and just be a good human. And I think between those 2 people, it kind of set me up for success in my own way. But I left home a day or 2 after graduation, after kind of a fight with a stepfather who was also an alcoholic, and went off on my own to try to figure out life. And that was a collection of sales jobs, furniture, GNC. I don't know how many people know that the vitamin store was commission, but it was my first commission job. And then got into selling furniture, and then
Drug dealing, huh?
drug dealing.
Yeah, like it. Yeah.
And then my manager at GNC told me that her husband had just got a job at the cable company, and he was making $1,000 a week, and they could get me a job. And growing up where I grew up, I don't think my parents combined ever made 50 grand in a year. So the idea that I could go make 50 grand, I did. So I went and got a job as a cable guy, and I went to community college in my lunch breaks, and that kind of started me off on making a little bit of money, and worked through there and transitioned into selling cable TV door to door. I probably cold called 250,000 people and door knocked 40,000 doors. So it kind of takes all the fear of no out of your life. And once I got through with community college, I ended up in Bellingham, and that's kind of where the story pivoted.
One thing I want to go back to, because you see like stories of people that start with everything and people that start with nothing. And in those worlds, they have these people that maybe they have everything and they just flounder and they're debilitated and they can't figure it out. And then you have people that have nothing that just cannot get out of that world because of mindset, right? Or resources, or a combination of both. But then there's the people that get out of both worlds, that maybe they have money and they launch from there. And there's the people that have next to nothing or have very little resources. How did you, about mindset, what did you do? Who are you talking to? Who are you listening to? How did you follow your vision of how you wanted your life or not wanted your life? Tell me about how did you develop that mindset to propel you out of that situation?
Somebody asked me once, what was it like to be a child where you grew up? And I said, I felt loved by my parents, but if I could give you one feeling that resonates as I think about my childhood, was being hungry. And I do a lot for our local food bank and things like that. And because I hate the idea of kids being hungry. And I knew growing up that I never wanted to be in a position where I was hungry or my family was going to be hungry. And it created like a hunger inside of me to go out and make something work. And I think that's an advantage that my parents gave me, is they gave me a gift of hunger and drive. Now, I also have friends that were raised in regular blue or white collar homes and everything was perfect, and their parents prayed at night and everything, just kind of a, picturesque kind of home, and they turned out okay too. And I think it's because each one of those parents probably gave their kids an advantage. And maybe they gave their kids an advantage of believing in them or supporting them or helping them into college or whatever that might be. My parents just gave me kind of a different advantage, a desire to never be hungry. And because of that, I chased money early in my career, probably more than I would have if I knew what I knew now. Like, I went for jobs that paid me the most money. Mm-hmm. I wanted to own a home. I wanted to have a car. I wanted to not have debt. I wanted to retire. Like, I had those visions of not being in a position where money was a problem. So I chased money, and that had some impacts on my life, good and bad. But overall, I think it's showed me that if you're going to work, you should exchange time for money. And the phrase that I say all the time is, I care about my hourly rate. I care about my hourly rate. So in business, it's not that I want to charge customers more and more money. It's that the hours that I spend doing the jobs that I do, I want to make sure it's the most productive. And if there's somebody better at something, they should do that if I could pay them less than what I think I could make if I spent my hours more effectively.
Yeah. It's about intention, right? And then using that time wisely. I always use the phrase return on time, because I hate the phrase return on investment, because it just makes me, it's too transactional for me. But, we all work in jobs where, I'm not paid a salary. Leo's not paid a salary. We're in a commission based environment. And whatever time I'm putting in, right, there's some sort of output. I want to go back to what Leo was kind of touching on too, is when you were telling me the story about kind of your early childhood. I think a lot of people could look at, when you started talking about your mom being, addicted to drugs and alcoholic, your dad taking you to a 280 square foot cabin. I think a lot of people could get, like Leo said, kind of stuck in that, rooted in just like, this is my situation, this is all bad. But when you talked about them, you ended it on a positive note, right? You said your dad taught you please and thank yous, to hold the door. Your mom taught you hard work, right? She worked 2 jobs. Have you always had that positive outlook on that upbringing? Or did you, I guess now as it reflecting back, did you have that positive outlook? Like take it back to teenage Ben, right? High school, college Ben. Did you feel that same way? Or are you now just, are you now realizing that, hey, you know what? This is the good that they brought out in me?
I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question, and I've probably done 1,000 interviews. So I appreciate that question. I don't think I had the best attitude or the best qualities in my younger self, even younger in business. I don't think I was the best version of me, and I know I'm still not yet. But like when I was in high school, a kid threw a water balloon at me, and I ran across the street, and I punched out his window of his car. I had such like an anger and temper inside of me that I would do things like that. My stepdad and I would get in matches where we'd knock the front door down, kind of things, and I was angry. And for a while, I held some resentment for my mom for leaving me in a situation with my stepfather, who's since passed away, and my mom's passed away too. But over time, I realized something. When I moved out, it wasn't probably a month later that my mom moved out. And when in speaking to her, what I realized is that she stayed in that situation for so many years because she couldn't afford to take care of me without him. So she made that sacrifice for me. So as much as I wanted to blame my mom, that it wasn't her fault. And addiction, my mom started using drugs and dropped out of high school, and but she was horribly abused, I think physically and sexually. And my mom was left alone with 4 or 5 different siblings at the fair and had to walk the brothers and sisters home from another city.
That changes you.
Yeah, and was left home for days on end without food in the house, and had to take care of the other siblings. And she chose alcohol and other things as a coping mechanism for the life that she went through. So what I've learned over time, and why you probably hear the positive side of me, is that I've learned empathy. Like before I make a judgment about my mom or my dad or another person or whoever that might be, I just got to ask myself, what are they going through right now? And it helps me understand them and helps me not have resentment or be angry against them. So I think what you're hearing is that evolution of my own emotional intelligence to understand, be self-aware of how I'm feeling, but also understand what other people are going through and be empathetic to them.
Just never know, right?
That's
Never
it's
know.
incredible. I think empathy is I definitely struggle with that. It's hard sometimes to put yourself in someone else's shoes. I think we're so focused on the grind and what's right in front of us and our family and our work and our income and our
The
paycheck.
logical
Yeah,
solution.
it's and then something right tries to deter us from that, and you get frustrated. You punch out the window, right? Rather than just stopping the car, saying, "Why is this roadblock here?" Right, and just dealing with it, right? Being empathetic, like you said. So that's that. I love to hear that. That's
I don't think I've lost my temper since I was right about 19 years old. The older I get, the calmer I get, because I didn't like being out of control. But can I tell you a story about empathy?
Yeah.
We own a software company called Brivity, and we provide software for real estate professionals, websites, CRMs, that kind of stuff. Well, this customer was being really mean to our staff. And the guy who runs our company, amazing guy in town here, David Wiggs, you guys should interview him sometime. He's an amazing human. He's the president of Brivity. He said, we got to fire this guy. I said, okay, I'm open to it because I don't want anybody to be mean to my people, but let's play a game real quick. He said, what's that? He said, there was 3 of us in the room. And I said, let's brainstorm what's going wrong in this guy's life. What do we know about him? Well, he moved from this state to another state and is restarting his business. Okay. Well, do we think it's going good? He said, no, probably not. So he's probably not selling any real estate. He's like, yeah, that makes sense. So if he's not selling real estate, what are the problem? Well, he's not making any money. Well, does he have a spouse or kids? Yeah, he's married. Well, how do you think it's affecting his marriage? Do you think they're fighting about money right now? And we start going through all these things and we get a little goofy about how bad his life is. Like his wife probably hates him. She probably has a boyfriend. Like we just like got to go through these things and we're kind of like building up like a little bit of like, you could tell by the time we got on the phone with him, we're like, oh, we feel sorry for this guy.
Right.
So we call the guy and we have a different tone and we say, hey, we understand you're struggling. And before we get started, I want to ask you a couple questions. How are you doing? What's going on in your world? How's your sales? You're struggling. Why do you think that is? Hey, if I could get you back on track, back selling, back in the place where you were and in this new city, would that be of value to you? Yeah, it would. Okay, I'm willing to do that. But I have one condition. He said, what's that? You will never be mean to my staff again. You will never send an angry email. You will never call support with anything other than a please and thank you. And if you do, you are dead to me, sir. I had to call him out. And at the end, he took it because he realized my first action was to help him. So sometimes now when somebody's really mean to me or, somebody's suing me or whatever those things might be, I just imagine in my head how bad their life is.
That's what I was going to ask. So you kind of frame it and try to, because it sounds like you had that process with those 3 people, but you have this internal process where, right, someone's mean to you or something's happening, that empathetic kind of, process in your head is you just try to break it down. Okay, what's going on in their world? And let me try to, ask more questions than react.
If you don't, with the number of customers that you both have had and the number of employees that we'll employ in our lifetime and the number of family that we have and friends that may not use our services, whatever that might be, it'll eat us up and we'll become jaded, angry, horrible humans. So it's part of my like self-healing of surviving business and surviving what we do is just putting myself in a position when somebody quits the job with me or somebody angry or my friend does something to me that I just go back and say, I can't be jaded and angry because there's other people still count on me. What are they going through right now? And that just helps me get back into the right state of mind.
That's huge.
So there's also a balance though too between the logical navigation of like a business, right? We have to scale back. We have to, acquire this technology, do this, that, or the other. And then there's the empathetic side. And there has to be like a line in the sand where, guys like us are probably sometimes too empathetic, right? From a like business, perspective. Tell me about some of those experiences in your life that helped you gauge like, this is a moment where as much as it sucks and from an empathy perspective, it feels bad, but also I have to do this for the rest of the people that I'm counting on, or they're counting on me.
I can think of a couple examples. One time I was struggling with a decision and I met with somebody, a mentor of mine, and he said, Ben, sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is be fair to other people while still being fair to yourself. And the real question he was asking is, are you being fair to yourself? Because he knows I'm always fair to other people. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So he wanted me to go back and say, are you doing what's right for you? Well, the same guy in a different scenario, he said, Ben, I love people. I want for them the very best. But sometimes people don't give their best and they put the mission in jeopardy. What he was saying was, don't expect me to save one person if that one person is going to cause the entire flock, herd, to go down.
It's going to compromise the mission. That
Yeah.
one person.
Yeah.
That sounds familiar. I think I've heard that one before. Yeah.
In COVID, I had a tough situation. When the government in Washington State said, "Hey, we're shutting everything down," we couldn't do open houses. We couldn't, like, everything was shut down, right? We were looking up and saying, I don't know how the businesses that I operate, our brokerages and our sales teams are going to survive. Well, the problem with that is I'd been taking the profits that I was making from those businesses and using that to invest in my tech companies. Well, I never imagined in my life that in one activity, one action, one life world event, that all my businesses would stop at once. Right. So I looked up and I said, if those businesses stop making income, I can't afford the software company. So I went on this activity where every day at 4:00, I met with every one of my leaders and executives, and we talked about what expense did we cut and what new revenue do we find. And everybody had to report something every single day of the week. And sometimes it was a Netflix account, and sometimes it was a major negotiation with a vendor or landlord or whatever that might be, right? And we have, today we have 700 employees and thousands of 1099 contractors. So it's a big organization. We had lots of people to meet with. But it came down to a decision that I had to make of, do I lay off a bunch of employees or do something different? So I chose to do something different. So here's what I did. I went to my employees and said, we're in a bad situation. Here's why. This amount of customers have canceled. Other businesses can't fund the losses. We're in a tough situation. I want to apologize because it's my fault. But here's what I'm asking y'all to do. I'm going to take no salary, no income. And you're all going to take a 15% pay cut. And if you can't, then I'll give you a month's salary and you can move on and go find a different job. Well, everybody in the company decided to stay. And with that 15% pay cut, our payrolls millions of dollars every 2 weeks, right? So it was a big amount.
It's not stressful at all, is it?
No. With that single change and with cutting expenses and finding new revenue, this happened in like March of start of COVID 2020. And then by July, we were at break even again. I took the 15% pay cut down to 10%. By August, I took the 10% pay cut down to 5%. And by September, everybody was back at their rate that they were prior. By the end of the year, I took all the profits that we earned by getting our business on the right side. And at the end of the year, I wrote a check to everybody for every dollar that they gave up during that time when they took a pay cut. I made it right because they stuck with me. Now there's people that quit. They didn't get made right. But the ones that stuck with me, right?
They got is what they got.
Yeah. And that was hard. I had, sitting the night before basically in tears in my bed, thinking about the conversation that I was going to have with employees the next day and the ones that trusted me. And, and for some people that 15% was really close to them paying their bills. Right.
Yeah. And I think you not taking a salary is saying one thing, you recouping, what you cut back from them when the company was made whole again. That says a whole nother thing.
I've gained a level of trust with those people
and loyalty. That can be a rare commodity in our business and in tech firm. You see it with Amazon, Microsoft. These people jump around company to company every year.
Seems like there's a lack of loyalty in that world as a category or as an industry. Just like I've got buddies that are in tech and they just, I'm no longer working here. And like, you're there. It's 2 weeks, man. Where are you at now? I'm at this company now. I'm like, what does that company do? And is that your perception of that world too? It's
almost the generation that we're in right now of, and also I don't think COVID helped because people didn't build bonds with people. Like we weren't in there shoulder to shoulder hanging out and doing things and doing all that kind of stuff. So we didn't have the bonds. So if you don't have the bonds with people, that's a major reason why people stay in the company they're with, because they have a relationship with people, right? Yeah. Well, when that goes away, then it's about money or it's about a new opportunity or whatever that might be. And I think it just exacerbated the whole thing.
So this is what I was curious to ask you about, because I struggle with this in my own business is, during COVID and even post COVID, we're seeing, some of it, a lot more remote work, a lot more desire for that remote work. How do you maintain cohesiveness? How do you maintain that level of trust and loyalty amongst have you basically told everyone's back in the office, people that are remote? I mean, you manage and you're a founder of multiple companies that are not just in Bellingham. How do you, across all of your companies, how do you maintain that level of cohesiveness and feeling of family?
Yeah, I think that I drew this triangle once. I call it my leadership triangle. And at the base of the triangle, let's divide this triangle in 3 or 4 pieces. Okay, so you can kind of visualize it with me. So if we look at this triangle, the base of the triangle, I put lead myself. And if any of us want to have a business or any of us want to be successful, the first step is leading ourselves. Health, finance, business, habits, relationships, any of that kind of stuff, right? Lead ourselves. If we're lucky enough to succeed in one of those areas, health, for instance, if you lose a bunch of weight, one of your friends comes up and says, gosh, how'd you do that? Will you help me do that? Okay, you've earned the right in the second piece of the triangle to lead others to do what you did. In real estate, Leo, you become successful. People raise their hand and say, I want to have the success that Leo's had.
Right.
Okay, great. So they are going to go, and Leo has earned the right to lead others. Well, when you lead others long enough, somebody looks up and says, I need a bigger opportunity. And one of 2 things happens. One, they leave and they go do something else, which has happened to me lots of times. Most of the time it was my fault, by the way. Or 2, you create an opportunity for them where they don't have to leave, but they can still have the world that they want. So the third piece of the triangle is lead others.
So they push you to grow. You create a big enough opportunity or the right opportunity for them that forces you to grow.
Yeah, that leading others is you lead others until that third piece of the triangle, you've actually grown them into being leaders. So think of it, lead yourself, lead others, and then grow leaders. And then the very last piece of the triangle, the very peak of it, is attract leaders. Leaders who have had success in their career, their life, they start raising their hand and they start coming to you and saying, I want to work with you. I want to be a part of your world. And that's when the only way that happens is when you've really shown that people who started with you grow into opportunities.
How do you vet those people coming into your, leadership triangle, we'll call it, right? How do you vet that? Because you own multiple companies. You said you have 700 people on payroll, a bunch of 1099 contractors. What's your vetting process for that? Because I think that's definitely something that, I'm learning as I go. A 30-minute interview, someone can tell you the world, right? They're going to do X, Y, and Z. They're going to bring you this value. They're going to show up 10 minutes early. They're going to change your life and change your business, make your life easier. What's your vetting process to basically call bullshit or to actually know, like, this person's going to turn into a leader and change my company?
The best hire you'll ever make is somebody that you've lived with for a while. That's why promoting people is so powerful, because you know how they behave, so you get to promote them to something. But at a certain point in your career, you don't have anybody to promote because you need something that you've never had in your world. You need a CFO, or you need a CTO, or you need whatever this position, a loan officer, whatever that position is that you've never been. So then you got to find somebody that fits that mold. And you can do it a few ways. One, you can gamble, just out of your gut guess and hope that it works out, which is how a lot of people do it, called gut hiring. Gave up thinking,
Yeah.
right? Or you could take them through a process. And my process would be very simply probably a 15-minute phone call. If I like that, we'd probably come in and spend an hour together. If that went good, I'd probably spend and reschedule for another day, another interview. I'd probably have right after that person talk to 4 or 5 people in my company so that they get to know our company as well. And my company gets to know them. So they'll give me kind of references. I'll be checking references during that same time. And then we'll probably have a final interview to get commitment. And then probably the day that they sign the contract and we agree on comp. So during that entire time, including reference checks and my company talking to them, we might spend 8 to 20 hours with a good candidate. But most people don't. They spend 30 minutes to an hour. But there's another scenario. Is where you're actively recruiting somebody. When somebody applies for a job, there's a good chance they're unhappy in their job or they don't have a job, right? Both situations is a little weird because a lot of times when people are unhappy in their job, some of the DNA is on them, right? So what I want is I want somebody that's super happy in their job, somebody that's crushing it. They love where they work. They love who they work with, and they're going to be sad to go.
Never thought about
That's
it
the
that way.
person I want.
Yeah.
So there's a guy that we hired. He's president of Place. His name's Chris Stewart. Chris Stewart was formerly the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. He grew it from 20-something thousand agents to 56,000 agents. He ran 1,600 franchises across internationally across the world. He's a machine. Well, I met him on a phone call, and he was trying to recruit me to come into his world. And I just wanted to get to know him. I was hoping that Berkshire Hathaway would use my software, Brivity, for their agents, or we'd find some way to do things together. But over time, I just really liked the guy, really liked how he showed up. And we kept going through this song and dance, spending more time together. I flew him up here. We hung out. And one day I said, I got to ask you a question, because I got to know him. I said, Chris, you're paid an enormous amount of money. He was. And he works for Warren Buffett, right? It's not a bad gig. I said, but I feel like you're a guy who's got at least one more home run left in him. I just want to ask you a question. Do you think you'll ever hit a home run at Berkshire? Now, Berkshire pays a lot and they're consistent, but their growth is, they're not a home run type company, right?
It's not a hockey stick.
It's not a hockey stick. I said, I think if you came and worked with me, we could hit a home run together. And he laughed at me. Then he hung up the phone. And I was on a flight, or he was on a flight. And then by the time I landed or he landed, he reached out. He said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah. We should get together again and talk about this." So he flew back up. We got together. We worked out a deal. And he was sick to his stomach going back and telling, because his boss was one of his close friends and a great leader in the industry. And that guy reports to the head of Power, which is the organization that in Warren Buffett, and then he reports to Warren, right? He was sick to his stomach walking away from that opportunity and scared because he's walking away for a startup with some kid from Bellingham, Washington, right? But he did. But it took me a year to build enough trust and respect and rapport before I had that opportunity that was right for him. And he's crushing it in our company right now. He's awesome.
And is in his role? Is it similar to his role at Berkshire?
A little different. He takes on a lot of things. One of the companies we have is called Place, and Place is a platform for top real estate teams, and we help them run their business better. But Place's future is to be a platform for the consumer, where a consumer would get everything they need for their home all in one place, preferably all in one app. So Chris is working on the acquisitions of consumer services, mortgage, title, insurance, those sort of things. So that's what his big mission is.
He's got a couple hats.
He's hustling. Yeah. We can't announce it yet, but we just added another 500 employees to our world in the mortgage industry. So that was his job, was to go out there and find a nationwide mortgage brand that would work inside of our.
He's got a knack for it. It sounds like
that's what he does.
Yeah.
What's something that people don't know about being a founder, CEO, or, whatever kind of title you want to take on, janitor, fun guy, right? What's something that because I think it looks all, rainbows and daisies and right, like, you read the accolades and stuff, and I know you hate it, but you're in Bellingham, and that's a pretty incredible feat, and what is happening, and over $1 billion valuation of company in Bellingham. But what's something that people don't know, or a few things that people don't know about being a founder or a co-founder?
Yeah, I think what we do every day is kind of bullshit. It's hard. And that's actually the competitive advantage of a successful founder, is they're willing to do hard. There's this great YouTube video of a lady talking to a group of basketball players, and she tells them to handle
Duke one, right?
handle hard better. It's awesome. It's so good. But here'd be my message to what I don't think people realize this. If you don't feel like you want to quit sometimes, you're probably not living up to your potential. I want to quit all the time because what I do is bullshit and it's freaking hard.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I'm doing. Like every single day I wake up running the biggest company I've ever run. I don't know what I'm doing. And sometimes I got to apologize to people like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to figure it out. Like walk with me. We're going to figure it out together. And that's hard because everybody looks and say, well, he probably has everything figured out or she has everything figured out. That's not the case. I don't know what the F I'm doing. I'm bumbling around the world trying to figure it out and calling people and asking for help and reading books and listening to podcasts and asking questions and making mistakes. And so that would be my question. That would be my answer is that you want to quit sometimes.
How do you?
Yeah, what about mentors? You talked about people you call. And we've talked about this before because if you're not good at something, you should probably quit. And if you're really good at something, you should have a coach. I think you should always have a coach, but that was what I was always told about things I wasn't good at and things I was good at. But tell me how has mentorship, some of the relationships that you've been able to build, some of the friendships, and locally, nationally, you've been really seeking always to learn and grow and knowing that you don't know what you don't know. And that's something I learned from you.
Yeah.
Tell me that effect that mentorship has had on your life.
You met a lot of my mentors and friends over the years that we've known each other. I'll tell you a transition that happened in that, Leo, was in the beginning, I was looking for a person to be my mentor. And what I learned over time is that no one person is the best at every area of life. Like I know a lot of rich guys that have shitty relationships and aren't the best dads, right? I know a lot of rich girls that have a lot of money, but they have no health. I know a lot of healthy people that have no income at all, ever, right? And I know some people that have amazing marriages, but they might not have a good business. So what's changed for me is I look for a mentor in each area of my life that I want to change. Like a couple of years ago, I realized my number one expense was taxes. And I have a belief that there's two ways that you can pay taxes. One, you can give it to the government and they can screw it up and not use it the right way. Or two, you can decide where you give your money, like charities in our community, Lydia Place, or the food bank, or those sort of things, right? You can decide. And by doing certain things, you pay less taxes, which gives you more money to give away, right? So I went and found a tax mentor. And that's what he's an expert at. His name's Tom Wheelwright. He wrote Tax-Free Wealth and the 7 somethings. Anyway, he's wrote a couple of books. You should read them. But he's my mentor just for tax. Now, I like Tom, but he's probably not going to be my mentor for relationships or for health or for business building, right? So I got to go find somebody for each one of those other areas. And that would be my kind of comment to you guys is find something that you need to improve in your life and find somebody that can help you improve it. And there's a really good chance that they don't live in our town.
How about that self-reflection process? How do you know that area of your life is suffering? What are some flags that go up for you that you're like, you know what, it's my health right now, or it's my personal relationships, or it's my business, or right, your tax being your biggest expense.
Well, that one hits you every year. It's like
there's a reminder.
Yeah.
There's a reminder.
There's a reminder. But you know, some of those other ones maybe where what are those flags that go up for you, and how do you reflect on those, internalize those, and realize, okay, I need to make a change here?
I think it used to hit me in the face when something bad happened, and I'm trying to be more in front of it now and asking myself the question, if I could change one thing this year about my life or my world, what would it be? What do I need to change? I think that the challenge is everybody talks about you got to have a balanced life. And in reality, that doesn't exist. Life is really about counterbalance. And Leo, you just had a baby. Like your balance of your life gets out of whack because now you have a newborn in your home, right? You're out of balance. So over time, you're going to counterbalance back to where you were by doing something different. So I get out of balance all the time. And the thing that I always put last has been my health. And it bites me more than anything else because it affects my energy and my relationships and my businesses and just all that, right? So I get out of balance with it. I'm like, oh crap, I got to lose weight. I got to get back to exercise and I got to start eating better. And I get back on track, but then something over here falls out and I got to go back and forth. So it's about being self-aware enough to know when are you out of balance and what area you should fix.
Do you think it's, as you were talking about that, I because I think we all struggle with that, right? Finding that balance between, health, relationships, family. And I love the counterbalance versus balance thing. Do you feel like it's those, those individuals that do hard better or that are highly functioning, that we're able to push super hard in that business front, that maybe, I'm seeing it as like one of those little meters, right? It starts going a little too far and your health is suffering, but to have that, like that realization that you need to go backwards. I'm just like, do you think there's some individuals that maybe their job or, they're not putting too much effort in, that it's just, they stay balanced? Or how do you feel that meter gets out of whack, I guess?
Like the perfect routine, the person that's like, oh,
yeah.
like,
I guess
what's the movie with Jim Carrey where he shows up? It's the Truman Show, like that type of person that has like everything perfectly laid out, nothing ever goes wrong.
I felt like I've been super obsessed with a morning routine lately. I guess this is what I'm trying to say. I've been really obsessed with this morning routine. I'm trying to win the day by 8 a.m. Right? So anything that hits me in the face, it doesn't throw me out of balance, doesn't throw me out of whack. Right? So I have a morning routine now, and I have a 5-month-old, right, which kind of triggered a lot of this. I wake up at 6:15, right? I drink the same. I always say I would be the easiest person to assassinate because I have the same routine till 8 a.m. Like if someone wanted to poison me or shoot me, it would be very easy because I do the same thing. I have my water, then I have my pre-workout. I go to the gym, right? I have my vitamin D. I have my smoothie, right? I get crews up, change them, give them to Kara, right? So like I have this morning routine. By 8 a.m., I've found that my mood through the day, if I have, an employee problem, a client problem, it doesn't throw me out of whack. Do you have a morning routine? How do you get your mindset right for the day?
Yeah, I hate mornings.
Okay.
So, and I refuse to be woke up by alarm. Like it's one of my life rules is unless I have like a 4 a.m. flight, I'm not going to use an alarm ever. I just like to wake up when I wake up. So first,
Nice.
But I have what is called my daily plan, and I do my daily plan at night when I get home. Just think I'm more wired as a night person, right?
Yeah.
That's what my 23andMe DNA test said as well. So I get home and I take a blank piece of paper or notepad on my phone if I don't have it, and I ask myself one simple question: what does winning look like tomorrow? If I only got one thing done, if I came home or I saw Leo and I said, hey, give me a high five, I killed it today, what would it be? And some days it's filing my taxes. And some days it's going to the doctor and getting that blood work that I've been procrastinating on. And some days it's hiring somebody. And some days it's having a tough conversation. And some days it's getting on the phone and generating some business, right? It's different things. Once I answer that question, I then do a few things. I will make a list of my priorities. On that blank piece of paper, I'll say, what all do I need to get tomorrow? I've already figured out what my one thing is, but what all do I need to get done? And I'll just write them down. I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to do this, that. But here's what happens. They don't come out of your head in the right order. They just come out of your head in whatever order is scrambled in my brain, right? So when I'm done dumping it on a piece of paper, then I look at that list and I put number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. I put them in the right order. If I get home the next day and I got number 3, 4, and 5 done, but not number 1 and 2, there's a great chance that I decided to go towards easy or towards the things I enjoy, or I didn't get the important things done. The next thing I do is I look at my calendar and I make room in it. I tend to cancel 50% of all appointments on my calendar. And my assistant, Aaron, helps me do a lot of that. But I find that most appointments on my calendar are other people's priorities, not mine. So I make room on my calendar, because if you don't have room on your calendar, how could I get my winning thing done for the day? And how could I get my priorities done? And there's nothing worse for me than getting home and feeling like I lost. The next thing I do is I plan out what I'm going to do for my, I call them rituals, but what am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? What am I going to read? And then I kind of have these bunkers in my world where my office has protein shakes, beef jerky, waters, like all the things that I need is there. It's in my car. It's at my house. It's in all my offices. It's there. So I know that when I go there, I have the things that I need to be successful. I get done with all that stuff, and I just make a commitment that tomorrow I'm going to follow that plan. The next day I wake up, whatever time that might be, I look at my list and I know what I have to do for the day. As long as I do that, I have a productive day. Now, here's how I can kind of prove to you guys that this works. Have you ever worked a really long day, 10 hours, 12 hours, 16 hours, whatever it is, but you
We're
kick
in real estate. We've been it's like 1 to 2 hours a day, golf course done.
you had a really long
Business
day.
is slow now, so
You had a really long day, but you kicked ass. And at the end of that day, you got home and you were jacked up and you had energy. Can you guys relate?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now let's think about a day when you didn't get anything done. And you got home after 6 hours or 8 hours and you got nothing really done. And you get home and you're exhausted and you feel beat. Was it because of the amount of hours you worked? That isn't what it says, does it? It's because you didn't win. And winning's what gives you energy. So if you win a life or you live in a job where you don't win every day, you're going to come home exhausted. You don't need a 2-week vacation once a year. You need to win every day, because if you win home, you come jacked up, ready to
What I
go.
love about yours is you're setting up what your wins are. Most people don't know what wins look like for them, right?
They don't even ask
setting,
themselves.
You're setting it up the night before so that it's preemptively in your mind set up. So you wake up without an alarm clock, which is great. I might need to start trying that. Hopefully I don't miss my 8 a.m. So
Do you use blackout blinds?
I do have blackout blinds. Yeah.
That's why you don't wake up.
Okay. So I need.
I don't have those. The baby has those. And that's more important.
The light.
I have a baby alarm clock.
Yeah.
He wakes
The
up all
light
time.
triggers our brain.
Yeah.
To wake up, and when you block it out, you wake up drowsy.
Yeah, I love the because I think a lot of people, right? They come home, they throw on Netflix or whatever, they get on the PJs, and then boom, the next day hits them in the face at 8 a.m. when the phone starts ringing.
Yeah.
Right. I love the setting your wins up the night before, so you're going into that day knowing what your priorities are.
The really key thing is asking the simple question: what does winning look like tomorrow? If I only did one thing, if I only got one thing accomplished or moved the needle in one way, what would that be? And most people don't ask themselves that question.
Yeah.
Let's pivot to leverage. That's something that you've taught me a lot about, and one of the coolest parts is once you start to really you step off the ego train and say, I don't need to be good at everything, and you go, I really actually suck at all these things, but I'm really good at these things. Then your life starts to grow. Then you get to grow with people. Tell me a little bit more let's talk about Erin specifically, or her role in your life, and then also people like that. How did you decide that I should not be running my calendar, or I should not be doing this, that, or the other? How did you get to know yourself good enough where you're like, I'm fired.
If I went back really early in my real estate career, I could sell about 2 homes a month. That's not the most productive. Like my friend Linda Hinton can sell 8 every month, and she has no admin and she just figures it out. That's not me. I'm disorganized. But when I took all the things off my plate that slowed me down, paperwork, flyers, entering things in the MLS, doing all that kind of stuff. It was 20 years ago, right? When I took all that stuff off my plate, I didn't sell 24, I sold 84 that year, because I simply hired Jolene and had her take those things off my plate. And the next year we sold 150 and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Every single year just kept growing, because I started giving things off my plate that slowed me down, or that I wasn't the best at, or didn't generate the most revenue or the most success for the business. Well, after about 6 or 7 years of doing that in business, I would come home at night and my power would be turned off. Not because I didn't have any money, but because I hated open my mail, and I never took the time to put on auto pay, and my water would be turned off, or my life was a disaster. I'd have clothes at the dry cleaners for months that I just forget to pick up. Just disaster. I'd book flights that I never got on, or I'd forget to book flights. Or so one day I went and I put an ad on Craigslist for a personal assistant. And this little unicorn of a human named Erin Granahan answered and said, came in, we did an interview, and I took her to my house the very first day. Super weird. I'm like, Erin, it's my mail. It's a disaster. I like, my whole life is a disaster. My dog needs to go to the vet. Like, everything's a disaster. She's like, I've done this for years and I can handle this. She's like, I can only work part-time. I said, okay, 20 hours. So we started with that. It was like 6 or 7 days later, she come in. She's like, I think it's more than a part-time job. I would like to work full-time. And that was 12 years ago, I think last month or the month prior. She's been with me for a long time. But she took everything off my plate personally, which allowed me to focus on the business. And when I was home, I didn't have to worry about if I had groceries or if the laundry was done or if the cleaners had showed up or the landscaper had showed up. She just manages everything. Now it's to the point that, when I buy properties, she signs for them. Like, she just manages all of those things. She's a lifesaver. And Leo, the reason that she was the lifesaver for me was because I had figured out how to do it in business, but I hadn't figured out how to do it personally. And it was my personal life that was falling apart. When your personal life falls apart, it's the business that falls apart next.
Right. How I think a lot of people would love to get into that sphere where maybe it's they're hiring a assistant in business or delegating tasks. I think a lot of times they see the expense and it's hard for them to see, the outcome on the other side, if that makes sense. How do you process that, and how do you do that? How did you know I needed this, even though I'm gonna have to, 20 hours a week and turns into 40 hours a week? That's not cheap, right? But how did you see past that I'm gonna make this tenfold?
Especially with the first one. The first one's the hardest. The first leverage point, right?
I love that question. Now, I'll give you guys 2 words, and one's leverage and one's luxury. And when you hire leverage, they give you time back and you replace that time with something more productive. And when you hire luxury, you get that time back and you don't do anything productive with it. For instance, I hired somebody to mow my lawn. Andy's lawn care, phenomenal. He always shows up. Lawn's perfect. He does everything. But I don't replace that time with anything else. I just am not mowing the lawn on the weekends. Now that's my time to do whatever I want for me personally, right? But when I hired somebody for my business and I got that time back, I spent that time building the business, hiring more people, generating more leads. That is leverage, because leverage, right, requires you to spend that time doing something more productive. Luxury does not. So when people hire, they have to ask themselves the question, am I hiring for leverage or hiring for luxury? Nothing wrong with hiring for luxury, but they need to understand that that's an expense. It's not going to help you make more money.
What's crazy is I've never heard it phrased that way. I think people hire for luxury first rather than leverage. I think that people hire the lawn care guy or gal before they hire, right, the leverage in their business to help them make more money. So they've just hired the expense rather than the expense that's going to help them make more money.
Yeah, I agree. If you came to me and said, hey, I'm thinking about hiring this person, do you think it's a good idea or bad idea? I'd say, I don't know, because I don't know your life, but could I ask you a couple questions? First question is, if you did hire that person, how much free time would that give you every single week? And you say, give me 20 hours. Okay. With that 20 hours, what could you do that would generate enough money to pay for that position 3 or 4 times? And then you'd say, well, I could call more people and get more people to refinance or to purchase or whatever it might be. Say, great. My next question would be, are you going to do it?
Right.
Are you willing to do it? Are you going to commit to do it? Because if you don't, it's a luxury. Yeah. You may know what you need to do, but you have to be committed to doing that. And some people aren't. That's why so many people in the real estate industry fail when they hire an assistant, because they don't use that newfound time to generate more business.
Right.
They just take more time.
They sleep in.
They take more social videos, and like they don't do anything that actually moves the business forward.
Right. I mean, content can, but it's pretty nebulous compared to the things that we talk about eating the frog in the morning. It's like one of those things where it's the thing you don't want to do, but you're like when we first linked up in real estate, I knew that I love making cold calls. Eventually I got, you
were good at it.
I was good at it. I got good at it, but I also you don't love getting, yelled on the phone, but at the same time you're like, oh, that worked. You get a little hit of dopamine there. You're like, oh, that worked. And that it works.
Yeah.
And you kept saying this is going to work, but kind of pivoting back to that conversation, I know exactly what you're saying, where somebody hires an assistant and then they're like, or they maybe they buy Brivity, and Brivity's this great system. We use it ourselves, and they don't plug anything into it, or they don't use it. And they're like, your system's not working. And you're like, dude, you have to still be the motor. You have to be the motor of this thing.
You have to work.
It's not my Peloton's fault that I'm chubby. I promise you. It has nothing to do with the Peloton.
How do you've met so many people through life and then growing a business, and you have you see people that are accountable and see people that are not accountable, and people that say they're going to do something and maybe they do it for a certain amount of time and they don't do it, but then you have some people that are really consistent, like Aaron and Ross and David and all of those, Jolene, Anthony and Ryan, all the people there. Tell me a little bit more about how do you assess talent? Because we've talked about this, that you've got the gut. Oh, this person says they love making phone calls. You're like, we'll see how long that lasts. Without being jaded, but then at the same time, you've got the emerging talent, you've got the proven talent. Tell me more about that, those metrics of gauging talent.
Very simply, talent gets results. And they get results in what they were hired to do. And if they don't get results in that, doesn't mean they're not talented, but they may not be talent for you. So when I bring somebody in and they agree to accept the job, my expectations is that they are going to succeed in the job that I gave them. Now, I have this, I call it the fiduciary duties of a leader. So there's a couple things that we as leaders can do to make sure that the talent that we hire is successful in their role. Number one, we clearly set the standards and expectations for what success looks like. So an accountant, we expect you to get these things done by this day. Telemarketer, we expect you to call this many people every single day, and you're going to set this many appointments. Real estate agent, you're going to sell this many homes, whatever that might be, right? We all have all these different standards, but it's clear. It's not nebulous. You're going to come in here, we're going to have fun, we're going to do that. No, in order to succeed, you're going to do this. You're going to have a standard, right? That standard should also translate to activities. So in real estate, my standards have been, you're going to call X amount of people a day. You're going to do 2 open houses a week. You're going to reach out to everybody in your sphere, and you're going to follow up with all leads that we give you. And you're going to use the CRM and the tools that we gave you. If you do those 4 things, I can guarantee you could be successful. Anybody in my world that has lacked success didn't do one of those 4 things. They just stopped doing the activities. Okay. The second fiduciary duty of a leader, we have to inspect what we expect. And when you hire somebody brand new, Leo, it's inspecting every day how they're doing and what they're doing. And then over time, you could just start inspecting every couple of days. And then over time, it's every week. And over time, it's every month. And then pretty soon you wake up and you check in quarterly with your people. And that's it. The third duty of a fiduciary duty of a leader is to provide the training, coaching, and mentorship that they need to succeed. And if I did all 3 of those things, set the standards, inspected the activities and the results, and I provided the training, coaching, mentoring, systems, technology, whatever they needed, right? If I did those 3 things and they're still failing, it's on them. And I don't feel bad parting ways with them. But if I didn't do those 3 things, I need to reset the relationship, apologize, say, I'm really sorry. I kind of let you down. I kind of screwed up on launch, and I'd like to get back in step together and try this again. Like tomorrow's the first day of work again, day 1. Let's restart. Are you in? If they're in, great, we'll restart. If it doesn't work out, I'm going to feel okay letting them go because I gave it a fair chance and I made up for my lack of leadership.
I love that. Let me ask you this. So there's no doubt in my mind you could have been the number 1 cable sales provider if you stuck with it, right? Could have been the number 1 real estate agent if you stuck with it. You would have made a good living. Why continue to make your life hard? Why continue to open these businesses, right? Why continue to challenge yourself? And this is not, I don't want that to be taken as a negative connotation, but you could have, right, stayed with this cable company, made a good living, right? You had said it that $50,000, both your parents had never made that amount of money. You could have continued, you sold 84 homes and you said 150. You could have kept on that trajectory. Why keep making your, right? Why keep opening these businesses and
more layers?
Right? More layers, right? Why? What is the draw to complicating the layers?
I got a variety of answers for that because it's a variety of things. One, I love what I do. So I don't go to work with this feeling of this sucks. Some days are hard, but in general, I like what I do. And I don't think I've lived up to my potential. I'm not a big daydreamer. I don't go I'm not Elon Musk thinking about going to Mars, but I know if I made $1, I could make $2. And if I made $2, I knew I could make 4. And if I made 4, I knew I could make 8. If I sold 1 home, I knew I could sell 2. If I sold 24, I knew I could sell 50. All those things were easy because I could always see a double. I know I can double whatever I'm doing because I'm not living up to my potential right now. That's first answer. The second answer is if you have employees and you care about them, the size of your business should be dictated by what they want in life, not what you want. And I've decided to have a lot of employees. And I want all my people to have the same type of life that I've been able to create. In order to do that, we got to have a really freaking big company. In fact, we're offered hundreds of millions of dollars to sell one of my tech companies, and I turned it down because at the end of the day, it wasn't enough to take care of everybody in my world. I could have bought a ranch in Montana and had my own Yellowstone show and had a rocking chair and a shotgun. It would have been perfect for me, but it wasn't enough for my people. I realized that in order to take care of all the humans in my life, I need to hit a home run. And that home run required me to go seek out investors and get Goldman Sachs to invest in our company and raise capital. And the next step is probably an IPO for us. And when we IPO, that'll take care of all my humans and take care of the company in perpetuity. And it'll be, I'll be free to go to that ranch in Montana and enjoy life.
Nice.
Let's talk a little bit about that process, because all of these, like you said, you're going through life just like everybody else is, in the sense that you don't know what you don't know, and you're having these experiences like, I'm also figuring this. I'm also human. I'm figuring this out. You're going into, how did that whole conversation start with Goldman Sachs? How did you created Place? You had this whole infrastructure. You had Brivity, the real estate side, all these great relationships with these top agents around the country. How did that kind of come to a head there with that conversation?
Place is really the culmination of 20 years of me working in mortgage, title, insurance, real estate, software for the real estate industry, all that together. I decided one day that if I combined everything, the sum of those parts would be worth 10 times what they would be worth individually. And I had to rebrand it. So we brainstormed for a long time, and we came up with the word Place, and I spent $3 million on place.com, which I was sick to my stomach when we wired the money. And like, that's a domain.
Man, I wish I owned that URL.
That's a domain.
GoDaddy.com.
Yeah, that's a domain name. But I knew if I was going to build a brand that was going to be worth a lot of money, that we had to own the brand and own the trademark and own the domain.
Yeah.
So we did. And then we started this discussion to get a value of the company and to get investors, which I'm going to pause from that story for 1 second and tell you something else. This aspirational young man came up to me once at a conference that I taught, and he said, Ben, I'm working really hard, and someday I'm going to be like you, and I'm going to do what you do every single day. I said, man, I believe you, and you better do it. Don't let me down. But before you get there, I want to tell you what I do every day. He said, okay. And I said, every single day I get on the phone and I lead generate. And then I have a whole bunch of appointments, and I try to close as many of those appointments as I can. And then I do a bunch of follow-up, and then I deal with all my problems, and then I go home. What's your day like? He's like, you do the same exact thing as me. I said, exactly. I'm calling different people now and having different appointments, but that's what I do every single day. I send 1,000 messages on LinkedIn to find a hire for my company. Like, me personally, I'm out there doing the work and lead generating and doing the job. But people think that when you get to a certain level, you don't have to do that stuff. It hasn't been my experience. So when somebody says, well, how'd you get Goldman Sachs to write you a check that big? Well, I cold called a whole bunch of investors. I had a lot of people tell me no. I got a database of people that I could talk to. I set a whole bunch of appointments. I pitched them all in 1 week, and Goldman made me an offer. Isn't that funny? Like, yeah. Hundreds and hundreds of people. I have so many denial letters of people that says, we don't think your idea is big enough. Like, it's a bad idea. We only invest in things that can scale and blah, 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 blah. Right. And they were
story all the time.
They were right, because the idea that I had at that moment wasn't the idea that I ended up with. And those no's actually led me to the yes that I got from Goldman. But when I sat down with Goldman, I gave them the pitch. They gave me an offer about 30-40% less than what we ended up at. And I had 11 other offers from other firms. I pitched 15, I think, and I think I had 11 or 12 total offers. And I went back to Goldman and said, I want to work with you, but it needs to start with a B. And they upped the offer, and we got the deal closed. And probably 3 months later, Russia invaded Ukraine.
I think you're going to say Russia made you an offer.
No. But
lots of rubles.
In the world of venture capital and private equity, Russia invading Ukraine stopped all funding. Mm-hmm. Nobody since that moment has been able to raise capital. It doesn't exist. You just can't do it unless you're an extremely profitable, right, lots of EBITDA type business. You can't raise capital. So if I would have waited 3 months, it wouldn't have happened.
With all those no's, why not stop? Why keep going, and why pivot your business into getting those yeses? How did you reflect back and say, okay, why am I getting these no's, right? It almost reminds me of your comments earlier about empathy, right? Kind of going back and thinking, okay, why are these people telling me no? There's got to be something in the business that I need to figure out. Why not just shut down and just say, you know what, I'm successful in doing what I'm doing. I'm going to keep going this direction. I know I'm right. I know they're wrong. Why pivot?
Well, I made promises to my people that I was going to build a company worth enough that they'd all be taken care of. They'd all be millionaires. So I didn't have that choice. But I had cold called 250,000 people trying to sell cable TV and phone and internet service. And I had door knocked 40,000 doors, right? I've got 300,000 no's and FU's and door slams and hangups in my life. Like, no's are not a bad thing anymore. I'm like, oh, well, somebody's going to say yes. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. Like, I'll figure this out. And that's what you got to do. You just got to have an attitude that you're going to figure it out. But the interesting thing that I did every time I got a no was I reached out and I said, what would I have said, or what would I have been doing to make you say yes? And some people just said, honestly, we like you. We just think it's a little early. Will you call us back later? And some people said, well, we didn't like this particular piece of your business, or we don't think that is going to grow to be big enough. So I learned just a little bit. And then right before that, I called a couple of my friends that were successful in raising capital. Tim Heil, he founded a company called Homeward worth $800 and something million. And my friend Austin, who founded a $1 billion company called BKCO, and Brad Inman, who created Inman News. I just called those individuals and just asked them questions and say, well, how did you do it? What did it sound like? And what did you learn? And they kind of helped me through it. I definitely didn't do it alone.
Yeah. I think a lot of people want to put the blinders on and say, there's nothing wrong with me or my business. It's them, right?
Yeah.
They're saying, no, they're going to miss out, rather than you were proactive in asking that feedback. Hey, you said no. Why did you say no? What can I improve on? Which is different from the majority.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
let's flip to the control triangle, because I still have that.
yeah, we were talking about this before.
One of my very simple, cool things that you taught me. Tell me a little bit more about the control triangle, because I remember one moment, and this was probably 6-7 years ago, and the business was booming, but I know that you were having a hard time on the personal side, and I think I was complaining about something that day, or I had something I just like, hey, I don't know what to do about this. And you sat down and you showed me this, like, hey, look, this is what I have to do, because there's all these negative things happening right now, but there's all these positive things happening on the other side. And then you showed me this is the process that I go through over and over to make sure that I can continue to level up. For our listeners out there, can you tell us a little bit more about the control triangle?
Yeah, it came to be on, I kind of call it my worst year. My worst year was my mom overdosed, died at 59. 2 weeks later, her husband, her third husband, who was a really great guy named Jim, died. And I caught one of my employees embezzling money from my company, who was living in one of my houses for free that I was taking care of, and he was a close friend. And my girlfriend ended up having a boyfriend. That was awkward. And I was dealing with the health issues, and I had a breakup in one of my businesses where I had to buy my partners out. And when you add all those things together, I had a tough year. And it was one of those years that I wanted to say, I want to quit. And I came up with this simple thought process, is that winners focus on things they can control. Winners focus on things they can control. And if I wanted to get back to winning, I use that phrase a lot in this interview, talking about winning. If I want to get back to winning, I need to focus on what I control. So what can I control? Well, number one, I can control my thoughts, what I know, what I think is possible, right? My mind. And that comes from positive influences and reading and knowledge and mindset and affirmations and gratitude and empathy and all that kind of stuff. Great. If I can control my mind, what's the next thing I can control? I can control my time. Steve Jobs said that innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. Gary Keller said that every yes must be validated by 1,000 no's. So 2 billionaires came back and said, well, the secret to success is actually saying no, not saying yes. Okay. So it's about, how do you use your time? Understanding that if you give time to one thing, you don't have time for another thing. We don't understand that time is finite. It's a fixed amount. We think if we spend time with somebody, we're doing good. We don't say the consequences because I spent time on this. I don't have time with my honey bunny or with my child or with my work or with my employees or whatever that might be, right? We don't treat time as finite, but it is. There's a fixed amount. So once you understand that time is finite, and if you give to one, you have to take from another, and you master controlling time, the next thing you can control is who you're around, who mentors you, who your friends are, who you date, like who works for you, their negative attitudes. I call it shitting in my kitchen. Like, I'm very careful about who I let in my kitchen because I don't want people to poop in my kitchen. I'm just super cautious about it, right? And because people come in there, like employees or customers or friends or family members, will come in and they'll say, this bad happened, blah. Yeah. And they don't want help. They don't want it fixed. That's it. They just want to poop right in the center, just all over. It's just disgusting. You don't want that to happen. But what we don't realize is that we can actually control who's around us. We can control how they interact with us. My mom, who was an alcoholic, when she called me after 1 or 2 p.m., she would talk about suicide, and it would ruin the rest of my day. She would say, I'm a horrible mom. I shouldn't be alive, that kind of stuff. And I love my mom. But if she called me after 2 p.m., I just decided not to answer. I would send her to voicemail. I'd check the voicemail, make sure she was okay. And I would call her back the next morning. Great thing about calling an alcoholic back the next morning, they don't remember they called you the night before. So it's always a surprise when you call them. But if I could control how my mom impacted my life, we can control about anything. And we don't even understand right now in our lives, there's 1 or 2 people eating up 80% of our energy. We got to decide, are they worth it? 1 or 2 employees that are the worst negative, right? Whatever.
Yeah. Well, typically we always wrap, this interview up with, because the whole premise is, right, a tipping point. And we always ask anybody out there facing a personal or a business tipping point in their life, right? They don't know which road to take, which path to take, what kind of advice would you give? But that triangle, I mean, I feel like that hit it on the head. But anything to add to that, if somebody's facing some sort of business or personal tipping point where, they don't know which direction to take, what kind of advice would you give them?
I'd probably go back to the control triangle, and I'd simply ask myself the question, in my current situation, what is it that I can control?
Yeah.
What could I do something, right? Well, what could I change right now? What can I control? After you do that, that's almost like triage, right? Triage, we're bleeding, right? We get shot, whatever that might be, and we just stop the bleeding. Well, once you stop the bleeding and you get stabilized, then you can start the recovery and the growth phase. The growth phase in my mind is what we talked about earlier, which is winning today. Then you would ask yourself, what does winning look like tomorrow? And get back into a habit of winning. And then you'll get your energy back. You'll get your joy back. People will start following you. People want to be led by you. Your business will grow. Your customers will want to work with you. It just will be like a big positive snowball rolling down the hill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that last part it's how you spend your money too. Like if you,
the tip of the triangle.
Yeah.
Thank you for remembering that. The very tip of the triangle, the fourth piece is how you control money. And we don't realize that money is something we can control. Money doesn't have to be something that happens to us. Money can be something that we use as a tool, especially in business. Like, the hardest decisions you make in money will probably be the biggest things that will set you free. And you got to be willing to dig into it and find out.
It's incredible. Well, I know I appreciate your time. You've inspired me. I've got a page of notes here from, things that you've said to all of our questions. And yeah, I think you're an inspiring guy, the way that you talk about your people and the people in your circle. I mean, really is, I can tell it comes from your heart and the empathy that you have. And, what you went on, what happened to you in early life and how you've spun that into a positive light, I think is extremely moving. I appreciate you sharing everything.
Also, I have an image in my head of Ben on LinkedIn setting off these messages like, so-and-so thought we should connect. Like those little spammy LinkedIn messages. I'm sure it was better, but
remember Josiah?
Yeah.
I got Josiah from LinkedIn. Josiah was living in Spain, and he was I had sent hundreds and hundreds of
his
LinkedIn
wife
messages.
Works with me.
Yeah. Awesome family. And he's one of the best hires that I've ever made. And I wouldn't have got him if I wouldn't have taken the time to send a message to him on LinkedIn.
It's crazy. I got my job when I worked at Umpqua Bank, my former employer. I had messaged somebody that I knew on LinkedIn, direct messaged her, because my ex-girlfriend's parents lived next door to her, and I was looking for a job. I got like 100 no's from all these tech companies in Seattle. And, you know, I'd graduated with my MBA and I thought I was hot shit. Everyone was telling me no. And I was in a bad place. Messaged her on LinkedIn. She said, oh my gosh, my boss is going to call you. That's right. You know, I just said, hey, I want to get in real estate. Rest is history. Now, what's weird is I'm technically her boss or her fun guy, right? I like that title rather than boss. But yeah, it's weird. The LinkedIn messages work.
Got to slide in those LinkedIn DMs, you know?
DM.
That's it. That's it.
Key to success. Well, Ben, as usual, I just appreciate your time, and it's good catching up with you. And every time I feel like we get to kind of set aside. There's so much we can talk about with business, but I just appreciate your willingness to just talk as human to human and just level with the realities of life and all the tipping points in life. So,
Yeah, my honor. Thanks for inviting me. It means a lot.